produced, and how do you kind of reflect back on it?
Well, for me personally, it's interesting because you start with this, okay, so you go away and talk about when you say nature, you mean blah, 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 and then come back and then talk about it. And then when you really start asking somebody, like, why did you write that? Or when they really start explaining, it ties into, like, their childhood, old loves they've had, where they've traveled in the world, what kind of house they lived in, the news, like, everything. And so you end up learning all these facets about another human being because you realize that, like, nature's been there the entire time that they've been here. And so it's all braided together, and it's kind of a really gorgeous way of getting to know somebody in a different way.
And for the piece I did at the end, the nature, I mean, you was part of that. You know, I wasn't thinking about that until I came into the group, right? Because I was seeing them, you know, echoing some of my concerns that I couldn't put in words, right? But they were putting them fantastically. So this recognition for me was a learning process. And besides, you know, it's amazing people. So we just bond together. You know, it's amazing to find these alike souls. Which
We
is
also I recall so many, because we practiced this so many times, and all of the connectivity pieces of actual acting really happened very organically. As we would read our pieces, we do read-throughs, and then we're trying to memorize. But every time we read through, a new connection popped out between two pieces, and we're like, okay, we need to figure out how to make this happen. What if we did this? No, that's not going to work. What if we did this, this, and this, and this? So it was always really a very, very collective, very collaborative process. Far more than most of the pieces of writing I've ever done.
Yeah. And as graduate
Process,
students,
yeah.
of course, until the last moment we did this.
Yeah.
Okay, now I have it.
It was also really interesting how a lot of the pieces echoed things that we were saying in our own pieces without even meaning to do so. So I think that we would try to pepper that throughout and weave them even tighter together when we noticed that there was a connection, that two people were talking about a similar concept.
And just on a, sorry, really quickly, just on a symbolic level, I mean, studying what we study and caring about what we care about can be like so overwhelming sometimes, right? It's just this giant, giant thing, and so when you kind of separate tasks, like all this needs to be talked about. I can't possibly talk about it myself. You know, for something bigger going into like scholarship and research and teaching, it just feels like, okay, I'll get this one, you get this one.
I'm curious, I teach gender nature usually in the spring, and so like this year we went out to the Labyrinth that's not far from campus, and we had read Terry Tempest Williams for that day, so I had people, before we walked the Labyrinth, I had folks read a passage out of the book that they were moved by and then talk about how it related to their life and that kind of thing, right? And so I'm curious for you all, because, I mean, you're with the Inside Out model person, but I think a lot of us enviro folks are, you know, onto this, right? Because I see so much change in the classroom, even if I'm teaching a class that's not environmental, and we just go outside. So the idea of taking the walk to talk about it, I like how you said that, you know, it shifts things because you've just done the river, so it's not all their own words. But I wonder if you can even remember back to what shifted for you when you went from a, you know, controlled indoor environment to an outside environment, and how that changes the conversation and that kind of thing.
So I just started my master's this past year, and the first semester was really hard for me. I moved to New Mexico, and I had also just come out of Peace Corps not long before, so I was really struggling with all of these structures. And
in all kinds of ways. Language.
So for me, my second semester, that's when I got into this ecoculture class, and my whole understanding of higher education changed. So like from a very, very large level, and I got to know, I was in that class with two of these people, and so this relationship, I think, sort of grew really organically, and we had all of those conversations, and we would go on our field studies and go sit in the caves and have these talks, and it changes every single facet of what you're doing, and that went across the board for this project, for all my classes, for my entire happiness and contentment in academia.
I think too, if I can reflect back, even though it's been a while since I actually did the activity in class, When you shift it from being inside to going outside, it's a lot less formal. You don't feel like you have to say the right thing. You don't feel like you have to please your teacher or something. You're just kind of like even going deeper into your own personal reflection, even deeper than a free write, because it's just so much less formal and there's so much less pressure.
Yeah, that's well said, I think.
Yeah, there's much more talking among people and less to the teacher.
Yeah, and the teacher can become more like a participant, I think, when that happens on some level. Because
Yes.
I'm reading my passage from the book too, and then walking the labyrinth and sharing my experience, and we're all more, I think it strips some of that power differential away.
One thing that I really noticed with this, sorry, can I get break for a second, is I've been doing I did this in New Zealand with several groups too, and actually Jeff and Rico and I are doing a study on all that has come out of these free writes right now. I think one of the things we've seen really huge looking at the data, now that we're looking at data as data, is the binary, the human nature binary, right? Which is so core to all the work we do in environmental communication, no matter what our approach is.
Yeah.
No matter whether it's made explicit or implicit, that's what we continue to see over and over and over again, that struggle with the binary. And most of the time, even on the first day of a class, people are already, once they get into the stream of consciousness, they see it, right? It manifests itself and suddenly they see it. Even as they're writing in that stream, they start to question it. And often the final day is very focused on another theme, a code that we've made is the all and everything. So yes, and so nature becomes the all and everything, right? So it really, which is all inclusive and embedded and intertwined. So the human is no longer the center or no longer separate, but no longer the foreground, etc.
Yeah, I think for me, coming from part of the world where theater and stage acting is not so popular as a mode of communication, I think this came out as something that I could take back home and probably encourage and introduce this in the way we communicate about nature, about environment to our to a larger audience, especially the public that doesn't often grasp very technical scientific knowledge. And I think your performance was so intelligent. It was, like she said, came out as something very fundamental belief in each of you. And it was very thought-provoking. So I kind of wrote a very small poem that I'd like to read. Wonderful. Yeah. When I say nature, I mean the end of all knowledge as we know it. A return to Blake's world of innocent tidiness. A moment of eternal reconciliation with emptiness. When I say nature, I think of a thought that has eclipsed me forever. That I'm nothing, that I'm no bloody thing. It's really self-negating, but
It's a paradox because you're also not anything.
when you think of larger, bigger schemes of things, I think you're always a little self-defeatist.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
When I think of performance,
Yeah.
one of the things that I carry away from this, that I certainly spend a lot of time contemplating what nature is and reading what other people think about it, and trying to talk that talk in classes and other places with folks. And I think you put on display a wide array of sort of definitions, and there's a kind of interactiveness with the audience. I feel it's not quite a menu because I don't just pick one. I find myself going, oh, not that one, though. Those two. And that interactivity is a really productive thing. And the other thing I would kind of point to, both of Deborah's work at the end, but I would say also in the performance itself, there's something generative. That the way you guys are processing through this encourages the audience, even without the prompt of a free write, to try and play along and try and figure out, well, where would I put that definition, or what do I want to borrow from this person or that person to get there. And I find that really very productive. And I think, to me, this is, when I say performance, one of the things that I mean is not just something that I'm going to sit, that sort of building on Bas Kershaw's idea of an ecological theater, I'm not just going to sit back and be entertained, like with the after dinner show. But I am going to be hailed to in some way participate, to interact with, and to not sit passively back. And I think there's something going on in this that's very productive and just illustrates in, what, 40 minutes, what I find difficult to do in a lecture or in a reading when it's all side by side, when you guys are kind of performatively putting it up on its legs and living that in your body, and then being in contrast dialogue sometimes, but sometimes conflict with each other. That is a very productive tension to try and work through. And I think, you know, my sort of nudge that I want to push you further on is this, I wonder if you feel this in the performance, that the individual monologues are brilliant, I think you've done really great writing, and it's wonderful to see them up on their feet. But when the ensemble participates with you in the monologue, or in some of the transitions, when you move to dialogic or even more choral work, where you really can play in the multiple voices at once, both with ideas of harmony and discord, agreement and disagreement in the ways that voices come together, that I think balancing out or playing with some of these different almost monologic takes on what nature might mean or what nature might mean to me, comes into an even more dialogic place and really shows us, like your last image of that networking of the audience, the networking of these different ideas, and that tension is simultaneously harmony and conflict. It is support and pulling apart. That's how tension works. And that's the productiveness of that image at the end, I think, in many ways. And that's also the productiveness of making this an ensemble work. And I just think, like, my third act that I want to push you on a little bit more is like up the dialogue a little bit in amongst the monologues.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I mean, that is Act 3. Act 3 is taking the content and the poetics and doing all kinds of poetics with it, completely with you, to ensemble. To ensemble it. Ensemble is a verb, not ensemble is a noun. Ensemble is exactly your process, but it's now, it's taking it third act on so we got an Act 3 metaphor again. Anyway, so hearing, echo, repeating, poetic, you know, I'm with you. Yeah. So we'll be here, you know.
So come to
We'll be the visiting directors.
Well,
No, yeah, how much
Thank you.
would it cost?
Our producer.
do you want to be VIP?
Yes.
I just enjoyed it so much and echo everything that's been said. And it feels so important, especially to share within this kind of conference.
Yes.
And within academic settings in general, of which it's not my primary world. And it's always astonishing to me, having taught briefly in an academic setting, how that the mindset is to take notes and to quote others. And it's something that my mentors have worked with me on quite a bit, as to, you know, never footnote anyone, you know, once it's become your own knowledge, you know, once you've really walked it and it's real for you, it's your own. And I find so interesting working in the field of environmental communications, how often people quote others. Like if I see Thoreau's name one more time, I'm just going to gag. And that's not to take anything away from his experience and what he walked in his life and what he wrote. And you know, Aldo Leopold, who is a saint in many of the worlds I'm working in, conservation. And it's so important for each of us to really delve into our own experience, what's real for us. And not only in the articulation that comes from that, but also just the embodied truth of knowing at some level what nature means to me in this moment.